You, as the leader, need to be the provider of support. You don't need to love your people. You really don't. You don't even need to like them. But do remember that you hired them. So why did you hire them if you didn't potentially like them? Well, you need to be the provider of support for your team. And it needs to be unconditional support. If your team makes an enormous, egregious, gigantic error, you need to back your team until such time that you can get your team alone and ask why and how. Why did this happen? How did this happen? And get some information. Now, it doesn't mean that you defend them in a way that makes you look not very smart to your superiors, but you support their decision until you can get more information. If your leader is screaming at you about something that your team did, your response needs to be something along the lines of, I can see that's what happened. You're right. This is challenging. Let me go find out what was going on and what went into this decision, and I'll get back with you, or I'll fix it, or whatever. But support your team. The second your leaders see that you're not supporting your team, they're going to wonder about you. But if you come to your team and say, hey, I just saw those numbers come out on the report and they're not right, and I knew they weren't right, and the president knew they weren't right. Now, what I did was let them know that I would come and find out what happened and that I could appreciate that they were irritated. But now I'm here to ask you all, how did that happen? There may be a very logical explanation. There may not be, but there might be. But you're not going to know if you don't ask. Your team needs to know that with very minor exceptions, you're going to be behind them and you're going to provide unconditional support. Now remember, business, not personal. So you want to make sure your support is that along the lines of business. You don't want to get into personal things with anybody that you're defending your team about. So, you really don't want to say, well, I know, and Billy's had a tough time this week. He's been up all night with his kid, but you know what? I'm going to go find out what happened with Billy, and I'll get back to you. Just because you know there's extenuating circumstances doesn't mean you share that with anybody else. Support is always positive. What you don't want to do is say, you're right, what a lunkhead, that was really stupid, let me go find out what happened. That's not supporting. It needs to be positive. I can see why that would irritate you. You acknowledge that the person who is not very happy is unhappy and say, but I'm going to find out what happened. I'm going to find out what happened in a positive tone. Your team members are going to look to you for inspiration, especially when things haven't gone well. Why should they keep doing this? Why should they keep coming to a job where they feel like they're getting beaten down by upper management? You need to keep them inspired. You hired them for a reason. They're good at what they do. You're training them to be good at what they do. Be supportive and be inspiring. Now, this might mean that you need to walk outside and run around the block occasionally because you might be frustrated. It's okay to be frustrated, but help them continue to be inspired in what it is that they do. What you'll find is all of these tips are going to help you be an effective leader, and the only thing you can reap from being an effective leader is an effective team.